Chers auditeurs,
Dear listeners,
bonjour.
welcome to Comme d'Archi Podcast Season 6.
Saison 6, dans le monde fascinant des architectes.
And in the architectural projects.
Je suis Anne-Charlotte Deponte, passionnée d'architecture et docteur des universités en histoire de l'archi.
I am one of the spokespersons of Anne-Charlotte, who is a PhD in architecture history.
Merci.
Thank you.
D'être avec moi aujourd'hui.
To be with us today.
Et
And
maintenant,
now,
lundi en français, place au talent.
and Wednesday, let's talk projects. In English, of course.
Bienvenue dans Comme d'Archi.
Hello, dear listeners. This is Esther on behalf of Anne-Charlotte. How are you doing? As I speak, I'm just back from the Forum International Bois Construction, which took place in the magnificent nave of the Grand Palais in Paris from February 26th to 28th. This 14th edition was dedicated to the theme of Climate 2050, and I'd like to come back to it today. Only communication, say the unhappy spirits? In fact, no, resolutely no, because the constructive future is being prepared. The construction industry is one of the world's biggest carbon emitters. It needs to step up its adoption of sustainable practices. Wood is the material by excellence that makes it possible. So here, we are debating the obstacles to the development of the wood sector, such as the regulatory framework, for example. It's a shame that the industry can't do more to meet housing needs. We want to do it. We're hanging on. Orders are at half-mast. Budgets have been cut or at best frozen. But the players are responding. It's a bit like the CME in December 2024. Only better, because here the constructive imagination really seems to be invited. The exhibition. On the first floor of the vast parterre, the stands of companies in the sector are spread out in a totally open layout. Institutional, industrial, and related professions. Around the perimeter, on the mezzanines, architects display their projects on printed panels surrounding beautiful models. All this is dominated by the splendid glass roof of the Grand Palais. And it's true that this metal architecture sucks us in, inspires us, draws us in. It almost makes us forget our subject. When I arrived at 8:30 a.m. on Thursday 27th, the light was splendid. All the stands lined up at its heart seem derisory. The wooden displays on the floor are crushed by the transparent vault. Two eras collide. The immense perennial showcase of an unprecedented building imagination, which human activity is struggling to fill, despite the ingenious wooden staging of the conference rooms. Did you know? Launched in 2020, the Forum International Bois Construction's eco-design approach aims to reduce its own carbon emissions as much as possible. To achieve this, the forum's scenography is based on the systematic reuse of stands, recycled furniture, and auditoriums. In terms of catering, the menus feature exclusively local produce from short distribution channels. And to top it all off, for the 5th time running, the Forum, in partnership with Plantons pour l'Avenir, is inviting participants to contribute to the replanting of a French forest plot. The aim is to gain a better understanding of the challenges facing forestry today. This year, the 1.3 hectare plot in Montfort-la-Maurie, north of the Rambouillet forest massif, will be replanted. Fortunately, the species will be adapted and more resistant. This approach is unique in the world of events, which are known to be particularly emissive. According to evaluations carried out for the forum, the carbon impact of its eco-designed additions remains below 50 tons of carbon, which we are told corresponds to half the construction of a traditional single-family home. The theme? Let's not forget that the forum is being held under the banner of the 2050 Climate Strategy. I quote, "It examines the crucial role of wood and biosourced materials in achieving carbon neutrality objectives," as the organizers point out. Well, I'm sure they've got some good ideas for next year's theme, but they'll have to use their fertile imagination to do better. In the context of the current climate emergency, ADEME, the French Agency for Ecological Transition, informs us that the building sector accounts for 23% of greenhouse gas emissions in France. In this context, the International Wood Construction Forum is the platform for dialogue and innovation. In recent years, it has become the most important event for the forest, wood, and biosourced industries. It invites professionals, students, and the general public alike to discover concrete solutions implemented in exemplary projects that illustrate the transition towards a more sustainable and virtuous construction. And it's working. I'm catching high school students falling head over heels in front of the models. Starting at 2 p.m. on Friday, February 28th, the afternoon is free and open to the general public. A chance. This moment is especially dedicated to the reconstruction of the roof structure of Notre-Dame de Paris. Enough to inspire vocations and, above all, to convince. When you look at all the architects' projects on display, the proof is in the pudding. A whole generation has taken up the subject, and a host of wood buildings follow one another across the panels, both large and small. You'll find some of the agencies we've already featured, big names and not so big names like Hemaa, Koz, Calq, les Ateliers 234 and ECDM, all of whom are renowned for their talent. Speaking of the latter, a tip of the hat to them. They were great concrete specialists. They've adapted and show us just how much with the presentation of wood, an office building in Grenoble, promoted by Vinci Immobilier, which also owes a great deal to the work of the CBS Life Team's timber builders and Arborescence's timber engineering. By 2050, buildings erected, renovated, or transformed in the 2025s, as well as their fittings, will be in full use. As a result, they will be fully exposed to climate change. To face up to this challenge, we need to anticipate it through forest management and new construction processes, so as to move away from hyper-emitting habits. To achieve this, most innovative architecture must incorporate wood materials and feature modular, scalable structures. What's more, dismantling and reusing different elements will save raw materials, prolonging the carbon storage time of wood and bio-based materials, just as our ancestors did. A question of common sense. However, things are changing, as the authors of Filière forêt-bois et atténuation du changement climatique point out. In their book, the authors, Alice Roux, agronomic engineer, Antoine Collin, head of the Forest Resources and Carbon Department at IGN, Jean-François Dott, researcher in dendrometry and silviculture at INRAE, and Bertrand Schmidt, economics researcher at INRAE, explain that two visions of the forestry sector's role in combating climate change tend to clash. One promotes the accumulation of biomass in forests to optimize carbon storage in forest ecosystems. The other advocates an increase in wood harvesting as part of a broad approach to the development of the bioeconomy. End of quote. I note in passing this propensity of man to always oppose concepts in order to better erect his frightening dogmas. It's true that dogma avoids reflection. On the contrary, the aim of this book is to use a forward-looking approach to enlighten the debate on the way in which forests and the timber industry can contribute to mitigating climate change. What emerges is not only a realistic and appropriate reforestation plan, but also a paradigm shift on the part of consumers towards wood and an adaptation on the part of manufacturers towards the marketing of ever more virtuous products. And the spectrum of biosourced materials is broad. In addition to wood, we're also talking about wood fiber, cellulose wadding, straw, hemp, combined with other materials such as raw earth and natural stone. You'll find them all at the show. They tend to reduce the use of fossil fuels, as in the case of concrete, or of materials whose manufacture produces massive amounts of greenhouse gases, as in the case of metal. And although these are also evolving considerably, they will always be useful. Nevertheless, the processing and use of these often local biosourced resources also helps to reduce the energy bills of building sites, and therefore their impact on the climate. What's more, building with natural materials offers optimal insulation, making it more resistant to temperature variations and bad weather, reducing the carbon impact of construction sites, as well as that of use, and facilitating low-emission reuse are the three facets of the contribution made by construction and industry to the climate. But what about digital consumption, which we talk so little about, but which, thanks to the power of AI, will hopefully enable us to make the right choices in an extremely complex alchemy? In this 14th edition of the forum, faced with this immense responsibility, what pleased me was the strong presence of an imaginary builder. Not so much real estate engineering, but above all, processes and architects. A sort of return to basics. The real estate world is beginning to understand that sobriety is essential, isn't it? And you already have so much to do in terms of maintaining and transforming your parks. And what about President Trump? Why don't you pay us a visit and reconsider your constructive culture, Mr. President? Forget prestige and bling-bling. Perhaps your presence at Notre Dame was just the beginning. Measure oh so much. Here, from virtuous stone and wood, from ancestral know-how, shines spatial generosity, anchors perenity, and why not, infuses spirituality. In the meantime, in France, let the architect trublions operate, and the small, agile industries recover and solidify. In short, let us breathe. We'll all be the better for it, won't we? Thanks to the Forum International Bois Construction, things are moving in the right direction. And thank you all for listening. See you next week for a new Com d'Archi, and until then, take care of yourselves. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening, and thanks to the sound engineer who was collaborating with us today. Don't forget to tune in to our previews on Instagram at Com d'Archi Podcast. If you enjoy this podcast, don't hesitate to promote it by giving it 5 stars and a little comment on Apple Podcast or on your favorite podcast platform. And above all, subscribe to listen to all of our episodes for free. See you soon, and until then, take care of yourself.